In 2017, the Geforce 1080 Ti came out, and I think could be considered the first 4K card. That's a fuzzy description because other cards could also run games at 4K at the time, and it's not like even this one could run every game maxed out at 4K. But I guess it was so much faster than everything else at the time that using it for anything less than 4K resolution just felt like overkill for a while. These days we have the Geforce 4090. And nobody's claiming it's an 8K card, but it does seem to be the first card that feels somewhat overkill for 4K. So I thought it would be fun to test it out at 8K. This is the same number of pixels as 4 4K screens, 9 1440p ones, or 16 1080p monitors. What makes all this more interesting for me is that I tested 8K on my Geforce 3080 about 4 years ago, reaching the surprise conclusion that it wasn't ready for 8K gaming. That its 10GB of VRAM likely wasn't enough, but neither was any other aspect of that card, because 8K is kind of difficult to run. The Geforce 4090 is approximately twice as capable as the 3080 in every way, and it boasts a huge 24GB of VRAM, compared with the 3080's 10. So let's try the 8K challenge again now, for science. We're doing this not because it's sensible, but because it's not, and it'll be years before it's really considered a viable gaming option. But right now it's a great way to bring the world's fastest graphics card to its knees. We'll start with native 8K, and by that I mean it isn't upscaled in any way. It's actually rendering all 33 million pixels per frame with no shortcuts. One of the newest games I tried this in was Star Wars Jedi Survivor, one of the most poorly optimized and buggiest games of all time. It struggled enough when I played through it at 4K, frequently crashing and resetting my progress. And it proves itself to be the one game I test in this video that can't actually run 8K. Even the menus don't know how to look at this resolution. And in-game, it is a disaster. We're talking 20 to 30 FPS, visual bugs, textures not properly loading in, a weird dark shadow carpeting the bottom half of the screen. I've never even seen half these bugs before, and attempting to run this game at 8K reminded me of how the Radeon 6500 XT used to struggle with games like Hogwarts Legacy, even at just 1080p. It just doesn't work properly. But I'm blaming the game in this instance, since even enabling upscaling didn't remedy these problems. Avoid playing this one at 8K. The Talos Principle 2 was the other current demanding title that I tested, and it handled 8K better than I expected. It was actually difficult to get this game to run at native 8K since by default I think it uses the Unreal 5 engine's built-in upscaler. But once I had set it to native, it handled 8K ray-traced Talos Principle 2 at about 20 FPS, which is a lot better than I was expecting. I mean, it's not playable, but I was surprised my PC didn't immediately burst into flames. Setting everything down to just high settings removed some of the ray-traced effects and it ran closer to 30 FPS. Though it's still quite a laggy feeling 30 FPS in this game, and even though it's all just puzzles and running about, I would still rather have higher frame rates in this sort of title. So I'd say the Talos Principle 2 can't be run at 8K natively just yet. Big surprise there. Ready or Not, despite looking worse than the Talos Principle 2, struggled with 8K even more. It was a struggle even to get it working, with it crashing from time to time. And even when it was running, it was only at an unplayable slideshow 20 FPS. I also tried Baldurs Gate 3. It helps that this game isn't particularly demanding, plus you don't need a high frame rate for this kind of game. No, you don't. But 8K proves to be a demanding beast, and at highest settings, it was enough to reduce even this game to a laggy feeling 30 FPS. Dropping things to medium settings only increased it to about 30 to 40 FPS, yet this made a huge difference to the responsiveness to the point where I'd say I'd happily play this game like this. But I'd be even happier if I could enable upscaling. But before we do that, let's slide on over to slightly older titles like Hitman 3. This is still the newest title in the series, and it's the one that adds upscaling and ray tracing support. Much to my surprise, I could run this game natively at 8K with ray tracing on. I mean, it was only 15 FPS, so not exactly playable, and when I disabled ray tracing it jumped up to about 40 to 50 FPS, which is well into the realms of playability for a title like this. Well done, Geforce 4090, you just about managed to run a recent game at native 8K. Assassin's Creed Valhalla ran at about 30 FPS, maxed out at ultra high preset, which is much better than the Geforce 3080 could handle the older Odyssey title, which it did at around 8 FPS. So I guess the 4090's extra VRAM works wonders in this unlikely gaming instance. Dropping the 4090 to a very high preset didn't improve things by much, and I was still missing shots and blocks that I felt I should have been hitting. But dropping to a medium preset made it run between 40 and 50 most of the time, and it finally felt responsive enough for me to be able to aim my arrows and to block incoming blows well enough that I didn't mind too much. But come on, well enough. 40 to 50 FPS, medium preset. That's an awful lot of compromises to be made simply to hit the 8K resolution. And I'm also amazed by, visually, how poorly these games have aged. I remember Origins blowing me away and Odyssey still wowing me with its draw distances and open world freedom, but this time around with Valhalla it just feels dated, like a console game from the previous generation, which I guess technically it is. So yes, you can play Valhalla at 8K maxed out, but it's a lot better just to stick to 4K instead. Death Stranding now, and it's built on a wonderful game engine. It's so well optimised, meaning that this is one of the few recent titles that can actually approach 60 FPS at 8K without any upscaling trickery. Okay, it only averaged around 50, but it felt okay. In fact, my biggest problem with 8K in this game was that it looked blurry and smudgy in motion, sort of like someone had left resampling on in the Vegas video editor. And when you've gone to such lengths to run this game at 8K, the last thing you want is a blurry image. I wonder if upscaling could fix this problem. Actually, I don't want that because I know the answer already, but I'll be covering that in a separate video to keep all you native resolution purists happy. You know, those people who fear that upscaling will in some way ruin the visual quality, when sometimes, not saying when, it might actually do the opposite. Mirror's Edge Catalyst is a gorgeous 2016 game that the Geforce 4090 can run maxed out at a solid feeling 50 FPS. I'm split about this game. It's fast paced, but a lot of it is just running in a straight line and pressing buttons from time to time, so I'd actually say this is a playable experience, albeit one that would still benefit from having more FPS. Battlefield 1, aka the last decent single player Battlefield game, still looks great to this day, and Ultra settings ran at 60 FPS or more at 8K. High ran about the same speed, which was a bit disappointing, but then lowering it to medium jumped it up to about 90 FPS average, which really helped me with the aiming and shooting in this game. But do you really want to play this game at 8K with just medium settings? No, of course you don't. Deus Ex Mankind Divided is 8 years old now, but it's still my go-to title to test because it was one of the first that challenged my Geforce 1080 back when I first got it. And I can best describe the Geforce 4090 as being able to handle this game at 8K kind of like the Geforce 1080 could at 4K. So about 40 FPS. So there you go, flagship graphics card performance has quadrupled between 2016 and 2022. And so have the prices. Crysis 3 next. I'm still using the original version of this game and not the remaster, firstly because I can't be bothered to buy it again, and secondly because this game being 12 years old, I've tested it on all types of hardware over the years, so I know its demands very well at this point, as I've seen hardware slowly unlock its playability at 1080p, 4K, and now almost 8K too, but still not quite. This version of the game doesn't have upscaling of any sort, but I'll tell you what, the anti-aliasing setting you choose still makes a big difference here. I've always believed SMAA to be the best anti-aliasing method to use in Crysis 3, but, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, I actually prefer the look of FXAA at 8K in this game. Because using SMAA, there's still noticeable shimmering and pixelation when I'm moving about, which is frankly unacceptable when I'm gaming at a resolution this high. FXAA does away with these visual artifacts, and at a minimal performance penalty. Also, if I drop the settings to just high, then the game still looks great, but increases the average FPS to a more acceptable, but still slightly laggy feeling, 60 FPS. This makes the Geforce 4090 only 50% faster than the 3080 is in this game for some reason, and I'm going to say it's going to require the next generation of graphics card before Crysis 3 can truly be called playable at native 8K. And the last game I tested was Left 4 Dead 2. Yes, I know this game is laughably easy to run these days, yet maxed out with 8x MSAA, the Geforce 4090 still dropped down to below 100 FPS at times. So how about that? It's easy to take for granted that a game this old won't pose a challenge for modern hardware, especially not a Geforce 4090. But at the end of the day, it's still rendering 3D stuff, and there are still limits to what today's hardware can achieve. You just have to go mental with the resolution and settings to find that limit in older titles such as this one. But if we drop the MSAA down from the excessive 8x down to a still perfectly reasonable 2x, then the game jumps up to beyond 200 FPS average and feels sharp and precise to aim and shoot with again. Though I swear the hit reg in this game these days still leaves a lot to be desired. So yes, in a conclusion that will shock literally no one, the Geforce 4090 can run Left 4 Dead 2 at 8K. Though I'm not sure there's enough detail in this game to do justice to it. Oh crap, I just realised I should probably test Counter-Strike 2 as well. This is the new Source 2 engine, but it is very well optimised. I discovered a few interesting things here though. The large frame rate dips seem to be something to do with having bots on the server, and while I'm recording this 8K video, it's causing microstutters in the frame rate which aren't there when I'm not recording using Shadowplay. So yeah, I could say that Counter-Strike maxed out at 8K can be run at about 100 FPS, but it does require using CMAA instead of the much more demanding MSAA setting. And aside from the bot-related stutters, it all felt smooth and responsive, so despite Counter-Strike 2's twitch-shooting, demanding kind of gameplay, I'd say it is already very playable at 8K on a Geforce 4090. As for why I'm playing against bots, MSI Afterburner's overlay doesn't play nicely with Counter-Strike's anti-cheat. so I can't play against real people, but it doesn't seem fair to play on an empty server. Hence bots. So without upscaling trickery of any sort, what can you run natively on your shiny new 8K screen to justify its expense? Not a lot. You can rule out recent, decent, demanding games, especially those containing ray tracing, and you'll still have to compromise on the settings for a fluid experience on any game newer than about 10 years old. But it will at least be somewhat runnable. For maxed out native experiences, you're looking at games older than that, but not too much older or they won't support 8K properly in the first place. And even if you can max these games out, they probably don't look good enough to justify this resolution in the first place. So there you go, you wasted your money if you bought an 8K screen. You get a much faster and more enjoyable experience from running those games maxed out on a better 4K monitor instead. But never fear, for 8K is where upscaling truly shines. And when the pixels are this small, it will keep even the purest of 8K visual enthusiasts satisfied with the visual quality, if such people exist. Though if you're upscaling a game, then it isn't really 8K anymore, is it? So it's not really testing if the Geforce 4090 can run 8K games. So while I have nothing against upscaling, provided the result is more good than bad, I'll test upscaling to 8K in a separate video to try and keep everyone happy. So until then, have fun,